evening from Washington. I'm Laura Ingraham, and this is the Ingraham Angle. We have a huge show for you tonight featuring exclusives with Senator Rand Paul and Congressman Kevin McCarthy, plus a special Thursday edition of Friday Follies with Raymond Arroyo. But let's get right to our top story. How to prune the judicial branch. That's the focus of tonight's angle. As the media and their Democrat compatriots obsess about Omarosa or Michael Cohen or even John Brennan, President Trump is methodically putting a conservative imprint on the judiciary, and not just on the Supreme Court.
You know, when I got in, we had over 100 federal judges that weren't appointed. Now, I don't know why Obama left that. It was like a big, beautiful present to all of us. It was like the gift from heaven. We were left judges. They're the ones that judge on your disputes. They judge on what's fair on the environment and what's not fair, where they're going to take your farms and factories away and where they're not.
In only 20 months, he's nominated and the Senate has confirmed 26 new district court judges and a record 24 federal appeals court judges, with 2 more appellate court nominees scheduled for votes this week. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell should get huge plaudits for making Trump's judicial confirmations a priority. Yet conservatives are still frustrated. But why? Well, because the most notoriously activist and the most reverse circuit court in the nation, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals out west, is still sitting with 7 vacancies. Before Trump took office, the Ninth Circuit was totally lopsided, with 18 Democratic and 7 Republican appointees. Trump has managed to get 1 nominee through from Hawaii, and another from Idaho is likely to be confirmed later this year. Plus, a Seattle attorney was nominated to the court this summer. But still, now more than half of the 13 circuit court vacancies remaining nationwide are out in the Ninth Circuit. And what's more concerning is that the White House has yet to nominate anyone for the 3 open seats in California. I can think of a few good nominees. The reason for this lies with the time-honored practice known as blue-slipping court nominees. That's the courtesy of giving a state's 2 senators an opportunity to say yay or nay to the judicial nomination of a president going forward. And the Democrats, by the way, are already accusing the Republicans of messing with this 100-year-old tradition, which is kind of funny, considering that in 2013, Democrats themselves chose to go what they call nuclear, and ended the ability of opponents to filibuster trial and appellate court nominations. And when Harry Reid, by the way, announced the change, it was all, of course, making perfect sense.
The rule change will make cloture for all nominations other than the Supreme Court a majority threshold vote, yes or no. The Senate is a living thing, and to survive it must change, as it has over the history of this great country. To the average American, adapting the rules to make the Senate work again is just common sense.
Just common sense. Okay, well, it's time for Senate Republicans to use their own common sense to bust the current standoff with California Senators Kamala Harris and Dianne Feinstein. As all these seats sit empty on the Ninth Circuit, it continues on its progressive merry way. So is it time to formally ditch the slip? The argument against doing that, after all, could be that this could all come back to bite Republicans big time when a Democrat wins the White House down the road. And I get that. I understand it. But given how the Ninth Circuit has stymied key elements of the president's agenda, I think we're kind of past the point of worrying about Senate traditions. The Ninth Circuit is completely out of control. From reversing the president's travel ban last year to blocking Trump on sanctuary cities, it's essentially been acting like an extension of the anti-Trump resistance. There is another option, though, that is short of killing the blue slip altogether, and it would just be to minimize its effect. In other words, the views of the home state senators are still a factor in selecting judicial nominees, but they're not the equivalent of an automatic veto over any president's picks. But we need to face facts. Even if the president fills all the open seats with terrific constitutional conservatives, the makeup of that Ninth Circuit runaway court will still be 16 Democrat appointees and 13 Republican nominees. But certainly there'd be a better chance to have balance in any random 3-judge panel, right? The odds are better that way. And that wouldn't just be better, by the way, for the president or his agenda. It would be better for the rule of law, the Constitution, and the country. And that's the angle. And it's not just the federal judges. The latest example in that horrifying case out of New Mexico involving a remote compound, child abuse, and radical Islamic extremists. Astoundingly, Judge Sarah Backus is granting bail to 5 adults in the abuse case, claiming prosecutors failed to identify any specific threats to the community. Now, that's despite prosecutors alleging that these guys were training kids to use all those firearms to carry out terror attacks at schools. So how is this possible? Joining us now with reaction is attorney Harmeet Dillon, who works on... Let's start with you, because I think the regular folks watching this cannot believe their ears, where we had the authorities who visited this compound said that, you know, this guy, the first police officer on the scene, said he had never seen conditions like this. It was so sad, so depraved. Kids were starving, and of course a body of a child found on that compound as well. So now 4 of the defendants have $20,000 bail set? What?
It isn't even bail, Laura, so it's worse than that. It's a $20,000 signature bond, meaning that if they don't show up for their court dates, they have to promise to pay the government $20,000, which is obviously ridiculous. If you have somebody who's potentially going to be put away for life on terror charges, a $20,000 promise to pay is not a deterrent for them to flee or to commit more crimes. This is as a result of New Mexico's very liberal bail law. They did bail reform in 2016, and the Chief Justice of one of the justices of the Supreme Court added some additional conditions to that, so that at the very early stage, the prosecutors have to show by quote-unquote clear and convincing evidence that the person is either a flight risk or a danger to the community. Now, let's review the evidence here. Here, as you said, you have 11 children who are starving and being trained, according to prosecutors, to commit crimes, including terror crimes, rapid recharging of guns, and are being abused. You have a dead child, you have numerous weapons, you have hundreds of feet of tunnel under this compound, and you have somebody who's being held on a kidnapping charge in another jurisdiction. So if this isn't clear and convincing evidence that A, there's a flight risk, and B, there's a potential danger to the community, I don't know what is. And the judge went out of her way to say to the prosecutors that, oh, well, this seems like an unconventional lifestyle that you're describing here, but I don't really see the danger to the community. I mean, it's crazy. Anybody watching this knows that that's nonsense. Unconventional lifestyle, quote unquote, from the judge on Monday. That's right.
Troy, this is what the judge actually said when they were discussing this bail issue in court. Let's watch.
The state alleges that there was a big plan afoot that the state hasn't shown, to my satisfaction, by clear and convincing evidence, what in fact that plan was. There's no reason for me to believe that these defendants have in the past shown themselves to be a danger to the community.
So, Troy, again, to non-legal people out there, just regular people watching this tonight, they see a situation where you had 5 adults, 11 children kept in depraved, abusive conditions, 1 dead child, and they just have to sign on a dotted line that they'll pay the $20,000 when they come back for their hearing. How is this good for a community?
Laura, the judge here is just following the law. The 8th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which we don't get to talk a lot about outside of law school classrooms, is very clear. The government can't impose excessive bail. And excessive bail is anything more than what's required to make sure that somebody comes to court. So the court here imposed not only the $20,000, but electronic monitoring. They have to check in with their lawyers. and there are
Once
many
a week,
other
Troy.
less restrictive
One
means.
time a week. We got a dead child.
That's true.
Starving children. There would have been more dead children, undoubtedly, had authorities not arrived on the scene. And they don't have to fork over
Laura,
the $20K each, Troy, correct? Trump
all the
Harmeet's right
kids-
here. Correct?
That's right.
Laura,
that's right. It's a signature
all the
bond.
kids-
It's only
Please
20K
answer
if
the
they don't
question.
show up.
Do the defendants have to pay the money?
Not right now.
Hello?
No,
Thank
they
you.
absolutely do
Thank you.
not.
It's freaking outrage.
And-
I'm sorry, but it's an outrage that they don't have to pay the money. Why are we going to
Laura.
trust four adults, 5 adults total, but 4 adults who treated children this way with showing up for their hearing when they had tunnels under their compound? This judge is way off the rails. I know it's her call, but she's way
Laura,
off the rails on this one.
One of them has been taken into ICE custody. The other is being held on an out-of-state warrant. All the kids, thankfully, are in protective custody, and all the weapons have been taken. So there's no indication that they're a flight risk or that they're going to flee the jurisdiction. The government
Harmeet,
wasn't able to
Laura,
show
I mean, that's
in the court
nonsense.
hearing
That's
that,
he's right.
that they're not going to show up for their court date.
Troy's right that the prosecutor, according to the judge, Harmeet, said, you didn't give me the clear and convincing evidence that these people at present pose a danger to the community. And the constitutional amendment in New Mexico that, is part of the state constitution now said, look, that's an option. You have to show clear and convincing evidence. And apparently the prosecutors, according to the judge, can do that. Now, this judge has a bit of a reputation. There was another case where people were up in arms because of a low bail set involving another individual. We'll show his picture right here. Another individual, and it was another case of abuse, and the bail seemed low, $10,000, and people were not happy about that. But Harmeet, Troy's point is, took the guns, took the, I guess, the ammunition. Kids are safe. I guess what's the big deal?
Yeah, what's the big deal, Laura? I mean, it's res ipsa loquitur. They taught that in a law school meeting, that the thing speaks for itself. You got a dead kid. You got terrorist training camp going on here. There's no threat to the public. I mean, that is ridiculous. And, the prosecution included in their evidence to the judge a handwritten terrorist manifesto about what they wanted to do. And, of course, the prosecutor wasn't able to bring these children into court to testify themselves because, A, they're small children, B, they're, probably in a hospital recovering from this abuse. So, this judge went on to make some gratuitous comments. She accused the prosecutors of playing on religious prejudice because the prosecutors mentioned in the court that these are Muslim rituals that were being done that tortured these children, leading to the death of one of them. And the judge said, oh, well, I can't take their religion into consideration. Nobody was asking her to take their religion into consideration. It's the specific acts of these specific criminals. Yes. And on top of that, yes, thank God one of these people is in ICE custody and one of them is going to be handed over to Georgia on child kidnapping charges. But if it were up to this judge, she granted very minimal conditions to all 5 of them. And that is an outrage, and that is a repeat pattern by this judge, a Democrat who came from San Francisco, my hometown, unfortunately. That's where she learned these practices.
Susanna Martinez put a statement on her Facebook page. She said this is the result of liberal pretrial release rules put in place by the New Mexico Supreme Court. Judicial activism at its worst, and something I've spoken about. It's time to put a stop to the revolving door in our justice system and keep dangerous criminals in jail where they belong. Troy, do you think because of the public outrage, this judge, could she reverse her decision? I'm not saying you want her to, but could she?
Well, I think a judge, if there's any change in circumstances, or if she was challenged on appeal, certainly could. And look, I'm not saying that what these people are accused of is anything less than horrific. And if they're found guilty, they should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. But the issue here is whether they should be given reasonable bail. And when people are given high bail, that tends to disproportionately hurt lower income people. And wealthy people shouldn't be allowed to just get out on bail because they have more money.
Yeah, well, we want to have a longer
They're being charged no bail, Troy. They're being charged 0 bail. They are being charged a signature, and that is the outrage. And by the way, Laura, this trend is going on all over the country.
Yeah, let me tell you.
All over the country, this is happening now.
Yeah, it is happening all over the country. But let me tell you, if a lot of the illegal immigrants have the bracelets on, the electronic monitoring bracelets, ankle bracelets, they cut them off. It's not like that's the be-all and end-all.
Of course they do.
Every week, so what? I mean, this is no big deal. But we want to have a longer conversation on another night with you guys about just the bail reform issue. It's something a lot of people aren't really aware of. It's fascinating, and you're both great advocates. So thank you so much for joining us. And I have a question. Is Al-Qaeda about to make a major comeback? A disturbing new report from the UN finds the terror group showing surprising levels of resilience and is now stronger than ISIS in places like Somalia, Yemen, and South Asia. For more, we're joined by counter-terror veteran Aaron Cohen. Aaron, I read this report, and I just read a report about what was happening in Iraq and in Afghanistan, specifically in Afghanistan, where our forces and the Afghan forces are losing some ground against the Taliban. And now this. What do you know, and what do we need to know as Americans?
Well, first of all, Osama bin Laden's son, Hamza bin Laden, who's 29 years old and, sees himself as sort of the next young gun on the street, is publicly come out and taken over for his dead father and wants to rekindle the Al-Qaeda brand. And as we know, with terrorism over the years in Israel, this is a very large psychological war, and the fact, that it's run by fear. And so what we're seeing here is the rekindling of Al-Qaeda 2.0 starting to resurface on a tactical level. I think that Al-Qaeda has had a significant amount of time since 2011, since Osama bin Laden was killed. All of the PR and all of the military operations had shifted to ISIS, primarily in Iraq and in Syria. And after President Trump came into power, he was extremely aggressive by unleashing our forces, not just our special ops, but larger quantities of conventional light infantry to really flush out those pockets. So it's given Al-Qaeda, Laura, a pretty significant amount of time to regroup. But from what I understand, like with any other terror group that we have taken down in Israel or have smashed in Israel, what happens is you have pieces of this organization which smashes into hundreds, if not thousands, of small pieces. And what they're able to now operate, and what they're doing is they're going dark, and that means that they're now operating in what I've called nomad terror, which is essentially they can function independently from central leadership, any type of real organization, and they can go online and they can train and recruit on this dark web and begin to carry out attacks, not unlike we saw in London just the other day.
Right, bingo. And when you hear a story like you just heard in the United States with this New Mexico compound, this bizarre scenario with the subjugation of children and the seeming jihadist training of the children to go into schools, what does that tell you?
Well, the threat is real, and what you have here is you have incubation happening here in this country, in this case, which is being handled. It's kind of disturbing what's happening with this judge and this bail that's been set, or whatever the lax restrictions have been set on the fact that they found essentially a terrorist training ground to train children how to commit acts of terror, which it's kind of blowing my mind that this isn't being treated as the most harsh type of terror investigation and then soften it later. Like, come hard on this thing and then back off if you find out that it's not what it's supposed to be. But it sounds like it's terror. It sounds like it's inbred. It sounds like it's a sporadic nomad terror camp. And so it's very disturbing, and it's something that I almost feel like we're going to see more of because it's that easy to set up. And you've got kids who are in hospitals being hidden in witness protection. I mean, this is very real. And I think it needs to be treated very real. And I think Hamza bin Laden is very real, and I think that ISIS being taken down is also significant because Al-Qaeda just went boom, and so all of it needs to be treated like terrorism.
Yeah, so Aaron, before we let you go, is it avenging his father's death? Is that the primary motivation, do you think, of Hamza? Or is it just a larger ideological, religious, struggle against Christianity in the Western world?
I think that's a good question. I think it's a combination of the two, and I don't mean to come down the middle on that answer, but I really do believe that it's a combination of, this theocracy, this Islamic-driven theocracy versus Western democratic values combined with the perfect incubator, which is Hamza bin Laden. He just married I believe it was the daughter of Muhammad Atta, who flew a plane into one of the towers on 9/11.
So
what they're trying to do is,
oh my God.
Yeah, nightmare marriage, and raised in hell, and here it is, being pretty correct. And so I think that these terror networks are using Hamza and his spark to try and rekindle this select correct. And I think it's all playing itself out. And I think the CIA and the NSA need to watch this really, really close. And thank God President Trump's around to get aggressive as needed.
Aaron, thanks so much. We really appreciate it. Senator Rand Paul was one of the first voices calling for it, and now John Brennan's security clearance has been revoked. So did Senator Paul convince President Trump to do it? Was he the one? Well, the senator joins us exclusively.
This is what dictators do. This is a dictatorial exercise of power that should frighten and call on all Republicans to say, Mr. President, you cannot do this.
This has huge chilling effect for national security officials. The notion this is unprecedented, the notion of an enemies list.
It's a clear abuse of power, and it's a mark of an authoritarian dictator, really, rather than a democratically elected president of the United States.
Well, that's all very subtle, don't you think? Well, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul made a bold suggestion to President Trump late last month: strip former CIA Director John Brennan of his security clearance, along with many other former government officials acting irresponsibly. And of course, President Trump is now doing exactly that. So does Senator Paul deserve some kudos here? The senator joins us now exclusively with reaction and details on his recent trip to Russia. Senator, great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
You came back to some pretty powerful news. I mean, were you the first one to suggest this to the president, and did you talk to him about this since you've returned?
I'm going to talk to him about it this weekend some, about the trip to Russia and also about John Brennan. I've been calling for a review of the security clearances of a lot of folks, Peter Strzok and others, for months and months and months. I wrote a letter to the FBI director last January asking, does he still have clearance? But with John Brennan, I think what the left is ignoring is that I think he should have had his clearance revoked for cause. He leaked information that came out in the media that we had a double agent in Yemen. Remember when we were going after the underwear bomber? There still is a bomb maker in Yemen. He leaked that to the media, to people, Richard Clark, who had a security clearance, and then he went on television saying, oh, not to worry, we have a double agent in Yemen. The double agent was still there. Bothered to ask who paid for it.
Did he say he didn't know about it initially?
I think he said he didn't know it was paid for.
Oh, was that kind of fuzzy?
Yeah, so the head of the CIA doesn't know that this fake dossier was paid for by the Clinton campaign. So that's either incompetence or he's lying, one of the two.
Senator, he was pressed on this about Brennan yesterday, and about the security clearance. Brennan was pressed on it yesterday, and then he was pressed on, well, could it be that the president is answering to a third party, not just to the American voters? Let's watch.
I don't know. He is the one who has to account for those previous actions, and I don't know what he may be concerned about in terms of what might be divulged as part of this investigation. I find his attitude and behavior toward Vladimir Putin and the Russians very, very puzzling. I don't know what it is that is behind that. I certainly don't know all the things that Mr. Trump has been involved in over the years, and I do not pretend to have that knowledge.
Yeah, and today, all those I don't know, Senator, but today the New York Times, he writes in part at the end, Mr. Trump's claims of no collusion are, in a word, hogwash. But he apparently says he doesn't know, but then his claims of no collusion are hogwash. No, the man is unhinged. I mean, that's the whole statement there. Unhinged.
All right. Well, the thing is that, you look at a guy who called the president treasonous. So the commander-in-chief he calls treasonous, and he's apparently that would be advocating for the death penalty for the president, and yet he still wants access to the nation's secret. Crazy.
So Russia, you just came back from your trip to the former Soviet Union. You met, I know, with top government officials, both in the what's equivalent of their legislature. What can you tell the American people tonight about the state of U.S.-Russian relations under President President Trump?
I think from both sides that our relations are at the worst ebb that they've been since the height of the Cold War. And this is a real tragedy. One of the great things that Ronald Reagan did was sitting down with Gorbachev. And so one of the highlights for me is I got to sit down for an hour with former President Gorbachev and talk about his recollections with Ronald Reagan, but also talk about how both sides, both Ronald Reagan and Gorbachev, had to defy the orthodoxy of their country to sit down and come to agreements. And they didn't, call each other names. They didn't say murderous thug and talk about all the terrible things, some of which did happen throughout a long period of time in the Soviet Union. They sat down and said, let's try to make it better. And they did.
Are some of these government officials going to be coming to the United States? I know you had extended an invitation. There was some thought of Trump meeting with Putin. I guess that's off the table.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot on the table, off the table. I think people are very confused about this.
They have two houses in their parliament, one called the Federation, which is like our Senate, their upper body, and then they have the Duma, which is the lower body. They have both agreed to come to Washington in the fall for further meetings. That's a good thing. The downside is the chairman of each of the committees is banned from coming to the United States because of sanctions. So one of the things I'm going to ask the president, I'm going to talk to the president this weekend, is I'm going to say, why don't we take people off the list, at least temporarily, who are in the legislature?
Yeah, or at least temporarily, so they can come and come and speak. Senator Paul, we really appreciate your coming in tonight, and thank you for giving the update on the trip. Up next, this is The Switch. Airplane peanuts, emotional support, miniature horses, and a new straw that you may not want to try. All that in a special edition of Thursday Follies with Arroyo next.
Good evening and live from America's News headquarters, I'm Jackie Ibanez in New York. From Harlem to Hollywood, tributes are pouring in tonight for the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, who lost her battle today with cancer. This was the scene outside New York's famed Apollo Theater, a very popular venue for the soul singer during her long career. Hundreds of fans gathered there throughout the day to give Franklin her due respect. And in Hollywood, Aretha's star on the Walk of Fame was adorned with flowers and mementos from her many admirers. Aretha Franklin was 76. Funeral arrangements not yet known. And the Pentagon reports that the Veterans Day military parade ordered up by President Trump won't happen in 2018. A Defense Department spokesman says the military and the White House have decided to wait until next year. This follows a report that the parade would have cost about $92 million. I'm Jackie Ibanez. Now back to the Ingraham Angle. Have a great night.
It's time for a special early edition of... There's just so much good stuff we have to get to. We have to do Friday Follies on a Thursday. We didn't have time to do a new graphic, all right? Give us a break. First up, one of the great traditions of flying is no more, at least on one airline. This is my favorite airline. You're not telling me this. To explain, we're joined by New York Times bestselling author of the Will Wilder series and Fox News contributor Raymond Arroyo. Raymond, so Southwest Airlines has taken away our peanuts?
They have taken away our peanuts. What? It is awful.
This is all we subsist on in the Ingraham family.
I was flying at the top of August, and I collect those things. I take them home to the kids. That's the giveaway.
Are you the same person who takes the shampoo and conditioner
No, I
from the
don't do that.
hotels?
But I do take those honey roasted peanuts I love. Well, I get on the plane, and the Southwest attendant tells me, we're not serving those anymore. I said, you can have pretzels or you can have these veggie chips. I said, I don't want your chips. They put out a statement. I'm going to read it to you. This is outrageous. Peanuts forever will be part of Southwest's history and DNA. However, to ensure the best onboard experience for everyone, you can put up the full statement. There it is. Especially for customers with peanut-related allergies, we have made the difficult decision to discontinue serving peanuts on all flights beginning August 1st. And they say they want peanut allergy sufferers to feel safe and welcome on Southwest. What about me? I am an animal allergen. I am allergic to cats and dogs. Do you know only 1% of Americans are allergic to peanuts? 30% of us are allergic to cats and dogs. And the aisles are choked with service animals, emotional support animals. There's an explosion of it.
First of all, the peanut allergies are very serious, Raymond Arroyo, so we have to be very mindful of that. I have a question. What are peanut-related allergies? I've heard of peanut, but what are the related allergies?
If there's dust in the air, what are they going to do? I don't know what happens happens, but I do know what happens when I get on board and the lady's got the netted little carry-on and there's a cat in there. I see those little devil eyes looking up at me.
You're not a cat
the sinuses
person.
do this, but
I love cats.
I pulled the data for you.
Not really, but
700 service animals fly every day. 281,000 service animals a year on most carriers. 751,000 emotional support animals.
Wait a
now,
second.
this is a newfangled thing, and I really think it's so people can get around the airfares for their pets.
Wait a second.
Look
Did
at
that horse make? Did that horse make it on a plane? I have seen a trend in people bringing on.
It's
now, I'm not talking
ridiculous.
about the little tiny dogs.
Okay.
I'm talking about the big Mastiff type dogs.
Yeah, I had an Irish wolfhound, literally 2 rows in front of me.
Oh, we need to
splayed out. It's like a man
picture
in the
one.
row. I don't know how you can let that beast. It's like a small horse.
Wait, so
sit in the
can
row.
people treat the dogs then like an ottoman? Because there aren't.
They have to.
There aren't footrests on most
That's what you
planes
have to
anymore, so
do.
that's a good ottoman.
And do
for
you
one.
remember Dexter? This was the emotional support peacock the woman tried to get on United Airlines earlier this year. This is video of it. She actually tried to get the peacock on board. United Airlines told her in January no. And Laura, we're going to have a quick moment of silence because Dexter, we learned this week, has died. That's our moment of silence. I think what I need is an emotional support dog or cat catcher to spare my allergies so I feel safe and welcome.
So the peanut allergy people, they're protected, but the
30% of Americans who are pet allergy sufferers,
they just have to.
You got to eat veggie chips and suffer.
This is the Instagram post about Dexter. We have to give Dexter.
Oh no,
his due.
don't worry about Dexter. That's so boring. No.
He's very. The owner is. He has survived. He is survived by his sisters, Ava, pictured here, and Jaja. And by all humans who loved him. Dexter, you will forever be missed and remembered with fondness and love. That's sad. You ever heard a peacock mate? Do you know the mating sounds of peacocks? It's an
I don't want
infernal
anything
sound.
to do with peacocks. The best thing about Dexter is now its feathers can be displayed in the foyer.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. Well, you have an update for us on the straw crusade sweeping the country. I hate plastic straws myself. I think paper's fine.
Okay.
Some celebrities have made a video, of course, warning of the dire impact of plastic straws on whales and sea life. Watch.
500 million plastic straws are used in this country every single day. And many end up in the ocean, polluting water and killing sea life.
If we don't act now, by 2050, there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish.
Now, do you know where that number comes from, the 500 million number? A little boy named Milo Kress. He was a 9-year-old in 2011. He did a science project. He called around all the straw manufacturers. They gave him an estimate. One of them said 500 million or so. He took it. That's what they ran with. Here he is on CNN. Watch.
Every straw we use, every piece of plastic, will be here on Earth, somewhere on Earth, even when my grandchildren are born. I started a project to reduce the number of straws that go into our landfills every day.
Can you imagine this?
He's adorable.
Yeah, well, now that little adorable kid has managed to outlaw plastic straws in Malibu, Seattle, Santa Barbara. They'll send you to jail for it.
Well, that's for the rich people.
Well, I was just in Malibu, and they are now introducing pasta straws.
What?
They had pasta noodles as straws stuck in the water
that sounds
glasses.
like a good idea to me.
Laura,
what's wrong with
you
that?
drink it, your water tastes like day-old rigatoni. That's the problem with it. It's really bad. Now, I have a suggestion. Oh, no, I took that picture. That's an actual pasta straw. It gets soggy, but it does change the taste.
Plastic is destroying our oceans.
Well, I have an idea.
Agree with that. I hate plastic all over the beaches. It's horrible for the marine life. Don't use as much. We got rid of plastic water bottles at my house.
I have an idea you're going to like. What? I think we need beef jerky straws, which we can bring on planes. We'll drink out of those and then feed them to all the service and emotional support animals.
Beef flavored water would be my idea.
I don't want any food stuff. What about people with wheat allergies, beef allergies? They should be considered too.
Raymond Arroyo, the malcontent flyer here on the Ingraham Angle. Thanks so much, Raymond. We have a lot more to get to right after this. With left-wing immigration activists earlier this week, the California congressman was delivering remarks at a public policy event in Sacramento when things turned pretty ugly. Congressman McCarthy joins us now with his reaction. Would they use it? Was it amor? Was it love? I couldn't hear all the shouts, but it looked like it was pretty raucous. What went down there?
Well, we were given a speech, and I was given the contrast between what we've been able to accomplish with President Trump across this nation with the tax cuts and others compared to what's happening in California. From raising taxes, they want sanctuary states, they want to abolish ICE, and that was one of the two protests that's happened with me. And what they were chanting was, if you don't let me dream, we won't let you sleep. It sounds a little like what Maxine Waters was telling them to do.
Well, Congressman McCarthy, I think this is where the left always goes off the rails. They go too far to the extreme. As people who are in the country, whether they're under DACA or they're here illegally, people don't like to think they're coming here to tell us what to do. I mean, they may get amnesty, they may not get ultimate amnesty, who knows, but it's a privilege to be an American citizen. It's a privilege to be a permanent resident. And in California, I mean, your state has been significantly altered in its workforce, some of it, necessary for agriculture, but it's been transformed over the years from, left-wing leadership on this issue.
They've gone beyond. They tried to make the state a sanctuary state, which I sat there and said I did not support. We're building the wall. We're building it in California, what we've been able to move within the federal government. But what else they were protesting, one lady held a sign, repeal Trump's tax cuts. And this is what we have. Yes, she held the sign up. And when you look at what's going on in California, this is the fear that I have with what's coming forward with November. They want to impeach this president. They want to abolish ICE. And remember in California what the state Senate did. They passed single-payer, government-run health care where you could not get health care from your employer. It would cost twice as much money as all of what California brings in their revenue. This is what they call Medicare for all, government-run health care that will actually end Medicare as we know it.
No, this is
more
free.
More than 100 Democrats in Congress.
Yeah, well, it's all free. They think everything's free. The money grows on trees, as my mother used to say. Everything's free, and that's what the new generation, that's why it's incumbent upon Republicans, and I've told the White House this, I think the president needs to have a real presence in California. I think it's good that you're up there speaking. The protesters are going to come. I wouldn't worry about that. You get a lot of respect, Congressman, because you put yourself out there day in and day out in your district, and other congressmen and women should not be shrinking from doing town hall events. No way. Go out and preach the gospel of economic growth, and I think it's good for all people. By the way, speaking of immigration, Congressman, I got to ask you about this wild story from your home state. I think it was officials just arrested this guy, Omar Amin, who's a suspected ISIS member. He's accused of killing an Iraqi police officer in Sacramento, but he came to the United States as a refugee, and he was even able to apply for a green card. Isn't this exactly why the president wanted an aggressive travel ban and aggressive vetting? But of course, we've heard that this constant refrain of a warning from the left.
But we still know the root of this poisonous tree was his attempt to ban Muslims. And remember, this is actually not going to make us safer.
They're all Muslim countries, and they're majority, and they are banned because of that.
It serves no purpose, and in fact, I would argue it's entirely negative in terms of national security. It potentially could cut off areas of intelligence that can help us protect ourselves from violent extremism.
Congressman, what can you tell us about this case? Because I know our viewers are very concerned about this.
They should be very concerned. But contrast this. Here I am yesterday giving a speech supporting the president and our ability to protect this border. They're protesting me there. And the federal government is arresting Omar Amin, who came to this country, was a member of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. He got approval to come to America, but he didn't come directly here. He first then went to Iraq, killed the police officer, and 3 months later comes to America. And why does he come to California? Because they send and advertise that they want to be a sanctuary state. He's sitting in Sacramento. The feds are able to arrest him. The FBI has been looking at him since, I think, 2016. This is why the president is correct. He was sitting there. You should vet these people. He said, no, he was just a refugee. That's why he was in Turkey.
Well,
he's a part of ISIS.
Yeah, Congressman, he came in under Obama.
Exactly.
And has anyone followed up with the former President Obama and said, does this give you pause about the type of refugee program we had in place? I mean, this is one example. All it takes is one person, Congressman, who has a connection or a part of a network that's overseas, one person to carry out horrific carnage in this country. That's all it takes.
And how much information did he pass back while he was sitting in America? And the most damaging part here is he got approved to come to America, but before he even came to America, he went and killed the officer in Iraq, and then came into America.
It's a scandal.
Under the Obama administration.
And of course, nobody, the regular media, it's like a blip, and then it's back to Omarosa. Congressman, thanks for the update on all of this. We really appreciate it. And stay out there speaking about the economy. Absolutely. Thank you so much. And by the way, the media are lambasting President Trump now for dehumanizing Omarosa. So what happens when a Clinton family member says something far more outrageous? Details after this.
Of dehumanizing your opponent, whether it's a political opponent or someone you disagree with, is rooted in very ugly history.
And he does that as a catcall, right, to his base, and to say, hey, look what I'm doing. I think these people are less than. I'm dehumanizing them.
The media are in a tizzy over President Trump's so-called dehumanizing comments about Omarosa, but apparently it's crickets when influential Democrats like the Clintons make outrageously dehumanizing remarks. Take a listen to Chelsea Clinton supporting abortion on demand.
It is not a disconnected fact that American women entering the labor force from 1970 to 2009 added $3.5 trillion to our economy, right? Like the net new entrance of women. That is not disconnected from the fact that Roe became the law of the land in January of 1973.
Wow. Joining us now with reaction, Fox News contributor Rachel Campos Duffy, along with Ellen Ratner, bureau chief for Talk Media News. Let's start with you, Ellen. When I hear Chelsea Clinton speak about all the money that the economy's gotten because of, I guess, total of more than 44 million abortions in the United States, which is a staggering figure since 1973 in Roe, that would improve the economy. And to that I say, to monetize life, to me, is pretty dehumanizing to a lot of Americans. And how much would 44 million Americans, how much would they have added to the U.S. economy, let alone inventions they might have invented or breakthroughs in medicine they might have? I mean, every child gone is a loss. But for Chelsea, it's a gain. So who's dehumanizing whom here?
Well, listen, I don't think it's right to dehumanize anybody. However, I have to say that choice is choice, and women have a choice in this country. That was what Roe versus Wade was about.
Well,
and
I know that,
think that's
but
fine.
We're talking about her comments about how it adds to the economy.
Well,
monetizing a human being. You know what else was good for the economy? You know what the slave owners said? Slavery was good for the economy.
Well,
but we thought that dehumanized people, didn't we? We outlawed that.
It did dehumanize people, but I have to say this, that why aren't men taking care of kids? If we had more equality, perhaps, as you would like, there would be less abortions, but there isn't equality in this country.
Rachel Campos Duffy, Chelsea Clinton is, pretty popular. She has a pretty high profile, and it's no secret that she's, pro-choice.
Of course.
But I don't know, coming off the Omarosa thing, I don't like anyone being called a dog. I don't think the president should have gone there. I mean, he calls everybody. And that's kind of his lingo, New York lingo. But I don't know, when I heard that, it's like, wow, that's what we're using now to justify 44 million abortions? I thought they were supposed to be safe, legal, and rare. Are 44 million rare?
No, absolutely not. And first of all, I'm really enjoying this moment of transparency in the Democrat Party. They're openly embracing socialism. They're telling the truth about abortion. Remember, they said, abortion is just health care, which is their favorite euphemism for it. We now see the truth. It is about power. It is about profits. That's what abortion is about. And you made a really great point, by the way, in the very beginning, Laura, when you talk about the number of women who are no longer who were prevented by entering the workforce because of Roe versus Wade. Those are 20-some million women, by the way, mostly minorities, who are no longer in the workforce, who are not contributing to our country, aren't paying taxes, aren't paying towards Social Security, aren't inventing the cure to cancer, aren't running for president. So again, I actually appreciate her honesty and transparency about what abortion really is about. It's about a person.
Well, since when is abortion about profits? I mean, I've never heard of
the sale of baby body parts. Please give me a break. We have lots of evidence on that. There were actually congressional hearings about the profit being made, not just on the abortion itself, but on the products of the abortion, on the human body parts.
Most of Planned Parenthood's revenue comes from either $500 million from the government, and that's for health care, even though they don't do ultrasounds, and they do other things.
They do a lot of health care.
They don't do ultrasounds, which a lot of people think, because heaven forbid you actually see what's in your womb. But it's about $500 an abortion on average, and so about half of their $1 billion budget comes from the procedure.
Separate health care for women, and you cannot dispute that.
Well, there are a lot of community health care clinics across the country that do not do abortions, who do a great job. But yeah, they do. They make their money though, not from giving out the pill. They make